The phone rang 3 times before he answered, and Maya pressed her palm flat against the cool glass of her apartment window, watching the city lights blur through tears she'd been holding back all evening. Her reflection looked ghostly in the darkened glass. Pale face, tangled dark hair, eyes rimmed red from the crying she'd done earlier. She took a shaky breath, steeling herself for what she was about to say. "Hello?" The voice was deeper than she expected, rough with something that might have been sleep or exhaustion. But it was late, and she'd prepared herself for this conversation through 3 glasses of wine and 2 hours of pacing her tiny studio apartment. "Hi!" Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended, almost a whisper. I just, I needed to call. I know it's late, and I know we agreed to keep things casual, but I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel." She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the window, feeling the cool glass against her heated skin. "I love you. I'm in love with you, and I know that's probably not what you want to hear. But I had to tell you. I had to be honest, because I can't keep seeing you and pretending it doesn't mean everything to me." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that she pulled the phone away from her ear to check if the call had dropped. But no, the timer was still running, showing 2 minutes and counting. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she brought the phone back to her ear. "Who is this?" The voice was careful, controlled in a way that sent warning signals skittering down her spine. Not the casual warmth she'd expected from Luca, but something colder, more dangerous. "What do you mean, who is this? It's Maya." Confusion made her voice sharper. "Luca, this isn't funny." "This isn't Luca." A pause, and she heard movement on the other end. Fabric rustling, footsteps on what sounded like hardwood floors. "This is his brother, Dante." The world tilted sideways. Maya gripped the window frame with her free hand, her wine-fuzzy thoughts struggling to process what he'd just said. His brother? Luca had never mentioned a brother. In the 3 months they'd been seeing each other, casually, always so carefully casually, he'd talked about his work in imports, his apartment in the financial district, his obsession with vintage motorcycles. Never family, never brothers. Dante Moretti. He said his full name like it should mean something to her, like it carried weight. "And you called my number by mistake." Horror flooded through her, hot and nauseating. She'd just confessed her love to a complete stranger. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Luca must have given me the wrong number, or I transposed digits when I saved it, or—" Her words tumbled over each other in her rush to explain, to somehow undo the humiliation. "I'm so sorry. Please just forget this happened." "Wait." The command in that single word stopped her finger, hovering over the end call button. "Don't hang up." "Why not? This was clearly a mistake. A horrible, embarrassing mistake." "Because I want to know why my brother would give you a wrong number." Something in his tone had shifted, gone harder. "And why you'd fall in love with a man who apparently couldn't be bothered to make sure you could reach him." The words hit like a physical blow. Maya sank onto her bed, the springs creaking beneath her weight, and pressed a hand to her chest, where it felt like something was cracking open. "Maybe he didn't want me to reach him. Then he's an idiot." Dante's voice had gentled slightly, though it still carried that undercurrent of danger that made her pulse quicken. "Or there's something else going on." "Like what?" "Like the fact that my brother doesn't work in imports. He works for me, and his job requires a certain level of discretion." More movement on his end, and then she heard the distinctive sound of a car door opening. "Where are you?" "What?" "No, I'm not telling you where I am. I don't even know you." "You know you just confessed your love to me by accident." A hint of dark amusement colored his words. "That's a fairly intimate way to meet someone." Despite everything, the humiliation, the confusion, the growing sense that she'd stumbled into something far more complicated than a wrong number, Maya felt a laugh bubble up in her throat. It came out slightly hysterical. "This is insane. Welcome to my world." The car door closed, and she heard an engine start. Now, are you going to tell me where you are, or am I going to have to trace this call? You can't be serious. Maya! Her name in his mouth sounded different than it had in Luca's. More deliberate, weighted with an attention that made her skin prickle with awareness. My brother has been playing games with someone's heart, and that someone just happened to call me instead of him. I'd like to understand why. I don't need you to. She stopped, because what was she going to say? That she didn't need him to defend her? To explain his brother's behavior? The truth was, she'd been feeling uncertain about Luca for weeks, sensing his distance even when they were together, noticing the way he checked his phone constantly and deflected every question about his personal life. This isn't your problem. It became my problem the moment you said, "I love you" to me. His voice dropped lower, more intimate despite the physical distance between them. And now, I can't stop wondering what kind of man my brother is, that a woman like you would love him. You don't know anything about me. I know you're brave enough to be honest about your feelings. I know you're probably sitting in your apartment right now, mortified and trying to figure out how to salvage some dignity from this situation. I know your voice shakes when you're trying not to cry. A pause. And I know you deserve better than a man who gives you the wrong number. Tears burned behind, her eyes again, but this time they felt different. Not born from her earlier heartbreak over Luca, but from the unexpected gentleness in this stranger's words. Why do you care? I'm trying to figure that out myself. He sounded almost surprised by his own admission. Give me your address. Let me come talk to you in person. I'll explain about Luca, about why he might have given you my number instead of his, and then you can decide what you want to do with that information. Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea, that inviting a strange man, a man who spoke with the kind of casual authority that suggested he was accustomed to getting his way, who was apparently involved in something that required discretion, to her apartment in the middle of the night was possibly the worst decision she could make. But underneath the fear was something else, curiosity and a desperate need to understand what the hell was going on with Luca. The Meridian Apartments on 5th Avenue, Unit 412. She gave him the address before she could talk herself out of it. But if you're some kind of serial killer, I'm posting our entire conversation to social media before you get here. His laugh was low and genuine, and it did something strange to her insides. Fair enough. I'll be there in 20 minutes. After he hung up, Maya sat on her bed for a full minute before jumping into frantic action. She splashed cold water on her face, tried to do something with her hair that didn't look quite so much like she'd been crying and drinking wine alone on a Friday night, changed from her ratty pajamas into jeans and a sweater that was respectable but didn't look like she was trying too hard. The entire time, her mind spun with questions and worst-case scenarios. Who was Dante Moretti? Why would Luca give her his brother's number? And what kind of work required discretion in a way that made it sound vaguely ominous? When the knock came at her door exactly 20 minutes later, Maya checked the peephole with her hand, wrapped around the pepper spray she kept in her purse. The man on the other side was tall, dressed in dark slacks and a black button-down shirt that looked expensive even through the fisheye lens, with hair that was darker than Luca's and features that were sharper, more severe. He held up both hands, showing them empty, and even through the distorted view, she could see the faint smile on his face. Not a serial killer, he said, loud enough for her to hear through the door. Just someone who wants to talk. Maya took a breath, unlatched the chain, and opened the door. The first thing she noticed was that he looked like Luca. Same basic bone structure, same tall frame. But where Luca was all easy charm and relaxed confidence, Dante was intensity barely contained. He moved into her apartment with a predatory grace that made her acutely aware of how small the space was, how his presence seemed to fill every corner and make the air feel thinner. Thank you for agreeing to see me, he said. And up close, his voice had more texture to it, rough velvet that made her think of expensive whiskey and dimly lit rooms. I'm not sure agreeing is the right word. Maya closed the door, but stayed near it, maintaining her exit route, even though some instinct told her this man wasn't a physical threat. At least, not in the way she'd initially feared. You kind of insisted. I did. He glanced around her apartment, taking in the small kitchenette with dishes in the sink, the book-covered coffee table, the framed prints on the walls that she'd bought from street vendors, because real art was beyond her budget. His gaze lingered on the half-empty wine bottle and single glass on her counter. You were drinking alone when you called. Is that relevant? It means you probably needed courage to say what you said. He turned back to her, and the directness of his stare was unsettling in its intensity. Which means you've been holding it in for a while. Are you always this observant, or am I just that pathetically transparent? Both, probably. The corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. Can we sit? Maya gestured toward her small couch, and he settled into it with the kind of careful control that suggested he was always aware of his body, of the space he occupied. She took the armchair across from him, maintaining distance, and tucked her hands between her knees to hide their trembling. Tell me about Luca, Dante said without preamble. How did you meet? At a gallery opening in Soho, 3 months ago. The memory felt tainted now, colored by everything that had happened since. He was charming, attentive. We talked for hours about art and travel, and all these things that made me feel like I'd found someone who understood me. She laughed bitterly. Obviously, I was wrong. What happened after that night? We started seeing each other, casual at first, but then it became more regular. Dinners, drinks, sometimes he'd stay over. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But there were always these boundaries. He never wanted to talk about his family or his work. He'd disappear for days without explanation. And he was always so careful to keep things from getting too serious. Did he ever bring you to his apartment? No, he said he was between places, staying with a friend. Another red flag she'd ignored, too caught up in the way he made her laugh, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. God, I'm an idiot. You're not an idiot. You're someone who trusted the wrong person. Dante leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and the movement brought him closer into her space without actually closing the physical distance between them. My brother is very good at making people trust him. It's part of what makes him useful in my organization. Organization. The word hung heavy between them. What kind of organization? The kind that operates in gray areas. His gaze never wavered from hers. The kind that requires people to keep secrets and maintain careful distances from anyone who might be a liability. Understanding crashed over her in cold waves. You're criminals. We're businessmen who sometimes operate outside traditional legal frameworks. The distinction seemed important to him. But yes, if you want to reduce it to basics, we're criminals. And my brother, he stopped, jaw tightening. My brother should never have gotten involved with someone like you, someone honest and genuine who was just looking for connection. Why did he then? Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. If it was such a risk, why pursue me at all? Because Luca has always been selfish. Because he wanted the fantasy of a normal relationship without any of the actual commitment or honesty it requires. Dante's voice had gone hard, anger bleeding through his controlled exterior. And because he's young and stupid enough to think he could have it both ways, keep you at arm's length while enjoying your company whenever it suited him. That's a pretty harsh assessment of your own brother. It's an accurate one. He ran a hand through his hair, and the gesture was the first uncontrolled movement she'd seen from him. Luca is my half-brother. Same father, different mothers. He grew up wanting to be part of the family business, but lacking the discipline and ruthlessness it requires. So he does peripheral work. Meetings, deliveries, reconnaissance. Nothing that requires real responsibility. And giving me your number instead of his? What was that? Protection, probably. If something went wrong, if you got pulled into anything dangerous, the number you had would lead to me instead of him. I'm the one with the resources and reputation to handle problems. His expression darkened, which means he was using you without even having the decency to take full responsibility for the risk he was putting you in. Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. He never cared about me at all, did he? Not really. I don't know what he felt. Dante's voice gentled again, and there was something almost kind in his eyes. But I know he didn't handle it right, and I know that whatever happens next, you shouldn't have to deal with this alone. What do you mean, whatever happens next? I mean that my brother involved you in our world, even if you didn't know it, which means you're visible now to people who might want to use you against our family. He said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing something mundane rather than her potential danger. I need to make sure you're protected. Fear spiked through her. Protected? I don't want anything to do with this. With your family, or your business, or whatever gray area operations you're running. I just want to move on with my life. And you will. But first, I need to know you're safe. Dante stood, and she found herself standing as well, instinctively responding to the shift in his energy. Has anyone approached you? Asked questions about Luca, or where he goes, what he does? No. Why would they? Because we have enemies, and those enemies are always looking for leverage. He pulled a card from his pocket, held it out to her. This is my actual number. Not the one you called tonight. That's a backup line I use for business. This is my personal cell. If anything unusual happens, if you see anyone watching you or following you, if you feel unsafe in any way, you call me immediately. Maya took the card with numb fingers, staring at the embossed letters. Dante Moretti. No title, no business name, just his name and a phone number. I can't believe this is my life now. It doesn't have to be. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something dark and woody that made her think of expensive hotels and boardrooms. I'll handle Luca. Make sure he understands he needs to stay away from you, and I'll make sure our enemies know you're off limits. How? By making it clear you're under my protection. His hand came up, and she thought for a moment he might touch her face, but instead he caught a strand of her hair that had fallen forward, tucked it gently behind her ear. The gesture was shockingly intimate for a stranger, and yet it didn't feel wrong. No one touches what's mine. I'm not yours. No, but they don't need to know that. His hand dropped away, but his gaze stayed locked on hers. In my world, perception is everything. If people believe you matter to me, they'll leave you alone. It's the simplest solution. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Something flickered in his eyes, something hot and hungry that made her pulse jump. The knowledge that I've done the right thing, that I've protected someone who deserves protection. He stepped back, creating distance even though she found herself wanting to close it. Get some sleep, Maya. Tomorrow, I'll have someone check your apartment building security. Make sure everything's adequate. In the meantime, keep that card close. He was at her door before she found her voice again. Why are you doing this? Really? Dante turned back, and the look on his face was raw in a way that made her breath catch. Because when I answered that phone tonight and heard you say, I love you, I felt something I haven't felt in years, something I thought I'd forgotten how to feel. He reached for the doorknob, then paused. You deserve to be loved by someone who values what a gift that is, and even if I can't be that person, I can at least make sure you're safe while you find him. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, with a finality that left Maya standing alone in her apartment, with more questions than she'd started with. She looked down at the card in her hand, ran her thumb over the embossed letters, and tried to understand how her life had become this complicated in the space of a single phone call. Sleep didn't come easy that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation, analyzing every word and gesture. Dante Moretti was dangerous, that much was clear, but he was also strangely honorable in his own way, and there had been something in his eyes when he'd looked at her that made her feel seen in a way Luca never had. Which was insane. She didn't know this man. He was a self-proclaimed criminal who operated in gray areas and talked about enemies and protection like they were everyday concerns. Getting involved with him in any capacity was possibly the worst idea she'd ever had. And yet, when her phone buzzed the next morning with a text from an unknown number, her heart leapt. Security team will be at your building at 10 a.m. They'll be discreet. D. She stared at the message, then typed back, "This is really not necessary." His response came immediately. "It is to me." Maya set her phone down and tried to focus on her coffee, on the mundane Saturday morning routine of checking emails and planning errands. But her mind kept circling back to Dante, to the controlled intensity of him, to the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious and fragile that needed protecting. The security team arrived exactly at 10. Two men in plain clothes, who introduced themselves as building inspectors, and spent an hour examining locks, checking sightlines from the street, installing additional cameras in the lobby. The building manager looked annoyed, but didn't argue, which told Maya that whoever Dante was, he carried enough weight to get his way without explanation. By the time they left, Maya's apartment felt different. Safer, maybe, but also more cage-like. She was standing at her window, wrestling with the urge to call Dante and tell him to cancel whatever protection detail he'd arranged, when her phone rang. Luca's name flashed on the screen. Her actual boyfriend, or whatever he was. The man she'd thought she loved, before learning he'd given her his brother's number and lied about basically everything. She answered without thinking, anger overriding caution. "What do you want?" "Maya, baby, I can explain." "Don't call me that." Her voice was cold, unfamiliar to her own ears. "Your brother already explained. Everything." Silence, and then, "Dante came to see you?" "Last night, after I accidentally called him and confessed my feelings, thinking he was you." She paced her small apartment, energy crackling through her with nowhere to go. "Did you really give me his number? Were you really that much of a coward?" "It wasn't about being a coward. It was about protecting you." Luca sounded stressed, defensive. "If something happened, if you needed help, I wanted you to have a direct line to someone who could actually fix things." "Or maybe you wanted plausible deniability. Maybe you wanted to keep me at a distance without having to be honest about why." She stopped at the window, pressing her forehead against the glass. "Did you ever actually care about me, or was I just a convenient fantasy?" "I cared. I do care." His voice softened, and she could hear the manipulation in it now, the practiced sincerity she'd once found charming. "Maya, you have to understand, my life is complicated. I can't just—" "I don't want to hear it." She cut him off, surprised by her own firmness. "Your brother was right. You're selfish. You wanted the benefits of a relationship without any of the actual responsibility or honesty, and I deserve better than that." "So what? You're with Dante now?" The jealousy in his voice was sudden and sharp. "Did he make you a better offer?" "I'm not with anyone. I'm protecting myself, which is apparently something I should have been doing all along." She closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten again, but refusing to let them fall. "Don't call me again, Luca. Whatever we had, it's over." She hung up before he could respond, and immediately her phone buzzed with a text from Dante. Everything okay? Had he been monitoring her calls? The thought should have been invasive, terrifying even. Instead, she felt oddly comforted by the knowledge that someone was paying attention, that she wasn't alone in navigating this bizarre new reality. Luca just called. "I ended it." "Good." A pause, and then another message. "Are you free tonight?" Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was the moment to establish boundaries, to make it clear she didn't want or need his continued involvement in her life. Instead, she found herself typing, "Why?" "Because I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere public, well-lit, with excellent security. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people sharing a meal and maybe getting to know each other properly. It was the properly that got her. As if their strange, intense meeting in her apartment didn't count. As if they were starting over with a clean slate. She should say no. Should protect herself from whatever this was becoming. But when she closed her eyes, she could still feel the gentle way he'd tucked her hair behind her ear. Could still hear the rough honesty in his voice when he'd said he wanted to make sure she was safe. Okay, but I choose the restaurant. Deal. And then, I'll pick you up at 7. Maya spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous anticipation that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the memory of dark eyes and a voice that made promises she wasn't sure she should believe. She changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple dress in deep blue that made her feel confident without trying too hard. When the knock came at 7 exactly, she opened the door to find Dante in a dark suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, holding a single white rose. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and handed her the flower. "Thank you." She set it in a water glass, grabbed her purse, and let him guide her downstairs to where a car waited at the curb. Not a flashy sports car or intimidating SUV, but a sleek sedan, with a driver who nodded politely as Dante opened the back door for her. The restaurant she'd chosen was Italian, family-owned, tucked into a quiet neighborhood in Brooklyn. She'd discovered it during a particularly lonely period of her life, and had claimed it as her sanctuary, somewhere authentic and unpretentious, where the food was incredible and the atmosphere felt like home. Dante didn't comment on the choice, just followed her inside and let her greet the owner by name. But she saw him take in the exposed brick walls, the mismatched tables, the family photos covering every available surface, and something in his expression softened. "This is perfect," he said when they were seated in a corner booth, and she believed him. They ordered wine and appetizers, and for a while the conversation stayed surface level. Safe topics like favorite books and movies, places they'd traveled or wanted to travel. But underneath the pleasantries was a current of awareness, a recognition that they'd already crossed boundaries that made small talk feel almost absurd. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said finally, setting down her wine glass. "Last night, you said you felt something when I called. What did you mean?" Dante was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. "I meant that I've spent the last 10 years building walls around myself, convincing myself that connection was weakness, that caring about anything outside my business made me vulnerable." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "And then I answered a phone and heard a stranger's voice saying, 'I love you,' with so much genuine emotion that it cracked something open inside me, something I thought was permanently sealed. That's a lot of weight to put on one accidentally misdirected phone call." "Maybe, or maybe it was the wake-up call I needed." He reached across the table, and she found her hand meeting his halfway, their fingers tangling together with a rightness that made her chest ache. "I'm not good at this, Maya, at being honest about feelings or making myself vulnerable, but I'd like to try. With you. You don't even know me. I know you're brave enough to put your heart on the line. I know you're loyal enough to fall for someone who didn't deserve it. I know you're strong enough to walk away when you realized you deserved better." His thumb stroked across her knuckles, and the simple touch sent heat racing up her arm. "And I know that when I look at you, I see something worth protecting, worth fighting for." "This is crazy!" But she didn't pull her hand away. "We met less than 24 hours ago. And yet I can't stop thinking about you." His admission was raw, unguarded in a way that felt like a gift. "I can't stop replaying that phone call, hearing your voice break when you said you loved him. I can't stop wanting to be the man you say those words to, the man who deserves them." Maya's breath caught, her heart hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Dante, I'm not asking you to fall in love with me. I'm just asking for a chance." He squeezed her hand gently. "Let me take you to dinner. Let me call you in the morning to make sure you slept well. Let me be present in your life in the way Luca never was. And if you decide I'm not what you want, I'll accept that. But give me the chance to prove I could be." She should be more cautious, should protect her heart, which was still bruised from Luca's casual cruelty. But looking at Dante, at the intensity in his eyes, and the vulnerability he was offering despite everything it clearly cost him, Maya felt something shift inside her. A recognition that sometimes the right thing was also the terrifying thing. That sometimes you had to take a leap of faith, even when you couldn't see the landing. "Okay," she whispered. "One chance." The smile that broke across his face was transformative, erasing the harsh lines and revealing something younger and more hopeful beneath. "Thank you." They finished dinner, talking about everything and nothing, and when he drove her home, he walked her to her door like a gentleman from another era. But at her threshold, he pulled her close, one hand cupping her face with a gentleness that stole her breath. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said, giving her time to refuse, to step back. "Unless you tell me not to." Instead of answering, Maya rose on her toes and closed the distance herself, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that started soft and sweet and quickly deepened into something more desperate, more consuming. His arms came around her, holding her against him like she was something precious, and she felt the last of her defenses crumble. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you, Maya. I know it's too soon and too fast, but I can't help it." "Then don't." She kissed him again, softer this time. "Don't help it. Just be with me." "Always," he promised against her lips. "For as long as you'll have me." And standing in her doorway, with this dangerous, complicated man, holding her like she was his entire world, Maya let herself believe him. Let herself believe that sometimes wrong numbers led to right places, that sometimes the most unexpected encounters became the most important, that sometimes love found you when you were looking for someone else entirely.